So this is where we're at on kind of this journey with tropical milkweed, is that a few years ago, the general consensus from the academic groups, the scientific groups, was like, tropical milkweed isn't great, but there's things if you manage it, which, let's be real, most people aren't going to manage it. But like if you do manage it, like it's okay for our monarchs, but plant natives better. But in the last year, there has been a pretty big shift in the scientific community where they're basically saying, if it's between planting milkweed to save our monarchs and your only choice is tropical milkweed, it's actually better, don't plant it at all. Which honestly is shocking to hear, right? I mean, think about that. You're like, I'm trying to do good. And they're telling me if the only plant that is available is tropical milkweed, like just don't even plant it? Why? So why is tropical milkweed a problem? So there are a few different issues that cause it to be a problem. So tropical milkweed is native to Central America and Mexico. Now, if you know anything about monarch butterflies, you may not know that they're actually tropical butterflies who head north for the summer because it's just too hot. And then they come back south for the winter because it's just too cold. And we get that. So how is it that having a plant that is part of their naturally occurring diet causing problems? Like, it's super confusing. But here's what's going on. The biggest part has to do with OE. OE is a parasite that exists with butterflies, specifically the monarch butterfly. And the issue with OE in itself, forget the entire tropical milkweed thing, is infected butterflies have a tendency to have a lower rate of eggs hatching, less caterpillars or more caterpillars that have deformities, less caterpillars that actually make it to chrysalis. Once they're in the chrysalis, even less of them can actually make it to emerging and becoming a full butterfly. And then those who make it all the way to adulthood have deformities, abdominal deformities, and they just tend to be a lot smaller. So that's what the challenge is creating. So that means for every 100 eggs that monarchs are laying, if they're infected from OE, we have less chances of having full healthy adults. And the more of the population of monarchs that's infected, the more deformed, parasitic, and lower birth rates we're going to have, which means that the more of them that are infected, the faster we're going to have a decline in the monarch population. So that's the problem with OE, generally speaking. Now let's talk about how tropical milkweed fits into that. So how does milkweed play a role in OE getting to monarchs? So basically what happens is an infected monarch comes and they land on here. They either lay infected eggs and they leave behind some of the parasite. Now I do see some confusion out there. People think that the milkweed plant is infected. The milkweed plant itself is not infected, as in if you were sick and you sneeze on a counter, the counter inherent to itself is not infected, but the surface is nasty. Similar idea. There is parasites on the milkweed. It's not in the milkweed. Does that make sense? So we have an infected monarch comes, lands, it leaves behind some of the parasite. It then lays eggs that are infected with caterpillars who come out and are infected. And now the plant just has a lot more OE on it. So a butterfly who isn't infected comes along and they may get infected themselves and then continue to spread it. So what does it have to do with tropical milkweed versus other milkweeds? The issue is that tropical milkweed just carries a higher load, which means that the tropical milkweed will infect more butterflies, cause there to be more infected caterpillars, and generationally, we've now weakened the species. And this is why the scientists are like, it's better you don't even plant this stuff. If you got nothing, that's better than planting this, because you're not hurting the existing population. Versus if you're working with like a native milkweed, you're actually going to help increase the population. Okay, so that kind of makes sense. Second problem with tropical milkweed is that because it's not native to the United States or Canada, the problem is it doesn't do what the native milkweeds are doing. What is that they're supposed to be doing? Well, they're supposed to be dying back or dying, one or the other. And this is really important for decreasing the population of OE, because when this dies back, remember, it's only on the surface. So when this dies back all the way to the ground, well, all the OE that was on it, no matter how much it had, goes back to zero. So when we start the next year, right, when it warms up and your native milkweeds come back, they're starting from zero parasite population on them. So the first monarchs who come, right, have a much lower odds of getting infected unless there's a high infection rate already in the population. So That means we kind of get a fresh start. And that's how historically we kept the OE population down. It's because while it could continue to exist down in Central America and Mexico, the vast majority of the population was getting through to fresh milkweed, which didn't have a parasite load. And when it did, it was very small. And because many of those caterpillars and butterflies died off, it didn't continue to persist, right? It spread as fast. That's basically what's going on. And so our native milkweeds play a really, really important part because they're helping with basically the control of OE throughout the population. Because tropical milkweed doesn't die back in the timing that it's supposed to die back, basically what happens is that it also is sending confused signals to the monarch, and they may not migrate because they think they've got still plenty of food. And this is very problematic for the southern United States because we do get cold enough that it will kill those monarchs if they don't migrate. Now you may ask, why do I spend so much time learning about this? Well, I live in Florida, and Florida is one of the very unique places when it comes to monarchs because we actually have a wintering population. We have a non-migratory population, and there is a lot of looking at that population to say, why isn't it migrating? Was it always not migrating, or is that a new phenomenon? And because tropical milkweed is super prevalent here, and it definitely does not die back here, that what is this meaning for monarchs, and is this changing the overall behavior to the monarch butterfly? So what do? You want to help the monarch. You don't want to buy tropical milkweed. So you may have watched one of my other videos. I have a lot of videos talking about monarch butterflies and growing milkweed. And you find out that there are kind of, if you really want an easy place to start when it comes to native milkweed, is there's big five. I can never remember the fifth one, but basically they are common milkweed, broadleaf milkweed, showy milkweed, I remember it today, swamp milkweed, and butterfly weed. Those are the big five. They exist in most of the continental United States. Not every type exists everywhere, like common milkweed, showy milkweed, and broadleaf don't exist here in Florida. But here's the problem, is butterfly weed, swamp milkweed, and tropical milkweed, when they don't have flowers, look very similar to each other. You aren't expected to be a scientist. You don't need to know how to identify, swamp milkweed leaves versus tropical milkweed leaves, know all their scientific names. Like, that should not be the expectation for the average gardener who just wants to help the monarchs, right? And people are taking advantage of that now. They are taking advantage of the fact that you know just enough to try to help the monarchs. And what they are doing is they're rebranding tropical milkweed as butterfly weed. Now you may be sitting here thinking, wow, we're in migration time period. I would hate to move my tropical milkweed at this point because I'm seeing active caterpillars. Here would be my 2 cents for you. As much as I discuss kind of the problems with the OE, here's what I did when I learned what was going on with tropical milkweed. Basically, I let it finish its season. I cut it to the ground when it was time for the monarchs to migrate. And then when it was the next year, I invested in native plants. And then as it tried to grow back, I just eliminated it and I replaced it with natives. So don't feel like today you have to make all the change, but make a plan. Now, if you haven't started your monarch milkweed garden yet and you want a crash course on milkweeds, go ahead and check out this video right here. Or if you want to know how to get lots of monarchs for your butterfly garden, check out this video right here. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.